Somebody say something. I think I can. There we go. I'm
What?
here, just off screen. There we go.
Sorry,
And Mark,
for being late. I grabbed the wrong Zoom. I was on Wednesday's meeting and nobody was there yet.
Guess we should get going since we have a lot to go over. Even though Jeff's not here yet. Share my screen. Here's our agenda today. You all got the document that Ed sent out with his proposed revision. Which I will try to get up. Okay. I'm on a call. We look at page 2, it's the track changes. Thank you, Ed. I didn't go past page 1, so I didn't see those first. Of the changes that he made to our track changes, Jeff's and I. Oh, Ginger, are you on the call for Jeff, or are you in addition to?
Sorry, I just joined from home to listen in. I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay. So I guess we would really need to hear from Jeff whether he is okay with these changes. So maybe we can actually do this. If he gets online, we can do this with him when he does that. I think I'm okay. It looks like you just made them more of a general statements than specific statements.
Yeah, we can discuss it with Jeff because I just want to make sure the intent's clear all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we will hold off on that. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Inga. I was just going to say, if you'd put that back up on the screen, I do have comments. I hadn't seen these, and I'm not sure exactly where they came from, but in the paragraph that begins, it should be recognized. In the second sentence, this wording that has been added about enforcement of certain ongoing conditions of approval. I don't think that language is appropriate. It certainly limits the statements that have been made by the county previously in different versions, and I think misrepresents the reality of what has happened in the past and in the more recent past. So I'm not in favor of that. Those two, the certain and ongoing.
Jeff's on, so he can. I believe that was his addition. Although I understand what he's saying there. This is based on basically the 3 separate conditions of approval that the county puts on a land use decision, which is things that have to get done before the proposed use can actually even begin, things that get kind of, that are kind of crossover that can extend beyond that final approval, and then that the county should get actively receive, such as documents, and then those conditions that are complaint driven. So I get what he's getting here, and so monitoring and enforcement of all conditions is not what the county does. The county places conditions of approval on an applicant, and the majority of those conditions are expected to be completed before we issue final approval and the proposed use begins. Go ahead, Jeff, we're talking about your language that you see on the screen, where it says an enforcement of certain ongoing conditions of approval.
Correct. And sorry I'm late. I was dealing with some healthcare issues for my dad. So what, and I just got on the tail end of Mark's objection to that. So what is your objection to that, Mark? If I could have you reiterate that.
Yeah, sure, Jeff. So my thought is that this language, which has been part of the introductory statement for many, many versions, is now being, in my view, severely limited in its application, because I think it applies to, particularly historically, to many, if not, well, not all, but many of the prior conditions of approval. This distinction that Inga, you're making is something that did not exist back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. This distinction between application completement and the ongoing conditions of approval, that didn't exist back in some of the older conditions of approval. And the fact that we have part of what we are trying to say here is that based on our review of the 86 conditions of approval, many of those are things that county readily admitted that they did not monitor or enforce. They were not just certain ongoing conditions of approval. So I think the way this language is worded, it's trying to carve out a little narrow window that, maybe there are some things that we don't look at. But historically, I don't think that's the case. And so that might be what everyone will hope will happen going forward. But historically, looking at the record, the monitoring and enforcement of conditions of approval have always been complaint driven.
How about if we took certain out and just said ongoing conditions of approval? Because of course, I think the primary argument is which conditions of approval really are ongoing and which have been replaced and which were conditions that were decided at the time that we got permits to do construction. If you're concerned about limitation, because I would disagree that all conditions of approval are enforcement of all conditions of approval are complaint driven.
Well, I think historically what we've learned by diving deeply into the record, there are many examples of things where it's unknown whether or not certain documents got submitted. It's unknown whether or not certain permits were received. Because the county has basically said on the permit front, they've said, that's not our job. Once we give an advisory condition of approval, then it's up to the applicant to go get a permit. We don't check to see if they actually get a permit. So I do think it's broader than ongoing. Certainly, I think it's broader than certain ongoing. But I think it is, again, from my observation and my involvement in reviewing all the documents, this limitation here tries to give the impression that the county does more than they actually do with regard to monitoring and enforcement of conditions of approval. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Well, I guess. Yeah,
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I disagree with that. I think there are certain conditions of approval that are one and done, and others that are ongoing. And I would agree that the ongoing conditions of approval are complaint driven. And we can argue about, and I think we have a difference of opinion on which those are. I don't think we should say all conditions of approval are complaint driven, because that's not true either.
So is it important to define between the two? Because I'm hearing two very different messages here, and certainly I've read in enough other places, and including previous versions of this complaint-driven mechanism. Now I'm hearing that there's, more than one different version of conditions of approval, that the majority or all of them need to be met before building or expansion or use of this, whatever the condition might be, is actually occurring. And certainly historically that has not happened. I'm curious if this is important enough to look at, well, so Mark's saying one thing and Jeff is saying another thing. If we're so convinced, from the Republic side of things, that there's a smaller number of ongoing conditions of approval, then I would like to see what that is. And I don't think that our reader should have to our reader's not going to pick up on the nuances here. So if it's clear that X amount of conditions of approval are complaint driven, and as Inga said, there's this whole other group over here in this other column that have already been approved, so wouldn't be complaint driven because we've already met the conditions of approval. And again, I take issue a little bit with that assumption, or that assertion, maybe is a better way to say it. I'm not sure, but I do know that I do not want to spend this entire meeting on this sentence. So do we need to revise this sentence, or do we need more content to be clear? I am not comfortable with the certain ongoing. I think it's too ambiguous. I'm also not comfortable with 2 lines below that where we use the word such. I think that's just not clear enough to the average reader.
Okay.
So
Can I
go ahead, Ed.
can I break in
Ed.
here? The intent of the rewrite from a couple of weeks ago is to make this an easy introduction to what's supposed to be primarily a historical document. It's a database. I didn't react badly to certain ongoing, but we need to get this done. Like we said before, things that are getting wrapped up in political positioning need to come out. Can we go to page, the revised page, Inga? Because I tried to get at some of that with this page 1. If you go to that, I tried to take out as many things as possible that were politically oriented. In certain ongoing, I didn't react strongly to, but I'd say just take that out. We're trying to get with facts. Jeff, I think when you see the summary table, you'll have a way to address the certain conditions. So I'd say let's just drop certain ongoing and work off page 1. See if you guys can live with page 1.
I'm sorry to jump in. I was having trouble with the system. Do we have 2 introductory pages we're looking at here? Is that what I'm hearing now?
One's just showing the strike through underlines.
And one
changes that
is
Jeff and I
clean.
made, yeah.
And one is clean. So if you can go back to the one that's dirty for a second. I think the other thing I'd like to suggest is the purpose, which I understand to be just simply a layperson's introduction. The arguments, if any there be, that can't be resolved should go in the body. One possible way to thread this specific needle is for this sentence to say, in Benton County, the monitoring and enforcement of conditions of approval have varied over time. And whether or not they, and they've been, some have been complaint driven, some have been others, you need to look to the body of this report for specifics. This is not the spot to lay out the key point. It'll get buried, as Catherine said. In this, no one will be looking for controversy in the introduction. So if we can just avoid this issue by acknowledging it's been done differently over time and there are ongoing issues that will be explored herein. Love us. Does that not accomplish what you want?
We don't have any data that says it's varied over time. All we have are these historical documents. Again,
well, I think Mark just said that has, and I was taking that at face value, that there's ways to enforce it have varied over time.
When I went through the documents, I didn't see anything that pertained to enforcement philosophy or approach. I think you're getting wrapped up into too much detail on using certain ongoing.
Got it. Okay.
Well, can I just ask a clarifying question here to this point? Have the enforcement of conditions of approval been complaint driven in Benton County? And I think the answer to that is yes. And I do think it's important that we at least acknowledge that in this space, whether we want to add a.
But it's not all conditions, Catherine.
And it doesn't say all conditions. So I'm looking for, that's where I was going, is do we want to add a different word to that? But I do think that the essence of the complaint driven process, which does exist in this record and still currently, is the way that these conditions are being addressed in part. How do we?
I'm going to try to split the baby here. How about many conditions of approval are complaint driven? I could live with that. That doesn't, it's not a limiting language, but it is not exclusive language.
Catherine, does that capture the key point for you? Because you have the complaint driven portion of it.
Right. So I don't necessarily have an objection to that, but I'm looking to hear from Ed and Mark also in that space. I think many is more accurate in quantifying. Certain ongoing is just too vague. And it does capture that complaint driven process, which is something in one of the recommendations that I think are coming out of this work, is that maybe that process needs to change, which is why it feels important to capture here. So if many conditions of approval.
I'd rather not use anything, but if I have to use something, many is okay.
And you could say staff has acknowledged. You don't have to, because if you haven't found it, Ed, you haven't found it. That's what I mean. And so, I mean, if the statement is more accurate, so that you're not making that conclusion, it's staff has acknowledged in Benton County, staff has acknowledged, the current staff has acknowledged the monitoring and enforcement of many conditions of approval are complaint driven. Because Inga just acknowledged that.
Yeah, the key point here for me is that by looking at the record, it's clear we can say many or most of the conditions of approval are not monitored or enforced by the county unless there's a complaint. And what I am concerned about is going forward, the citizens of this county need to understand that they cannot rely on a long list of conditions of approval for some future application and hope that that somehow is going to be the saving grace to make sure that the resultant land use activity is compatible with adjacent land uses. So,
I think that's clear, Mark. I think, and you put that as a recommendation, but the introduction, I think it doesn't need to be in the introduction. To the extent it is, I think you've got the predicate there because you have proof throughout all those tables of what you just said is being true. So you still get to make that point. And I think I mean, if staff is acknowledging what I just said, that's all you need to then make the recommendation. No one's going to come away from reading those tables to come to a different conclusion.
so where are we proposing to stick the word many?
In front of enforce right there, and enforcement of many conditions of approval or complaint driven.
And then we're going to delete the word such in the next sentence.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that's right.
That's
I
fine.
would put those conditions or something. You're referring back to that previous sentence.
Right.
Well, again, the
It's-
statement that has been made previously by Vance Croney and others from the county is exactly the sentence that's here. It hasn't been limited by some other try to, limit the scope. It's said, I think Inga, you have said this is actually your wording
But I
that
thought this
it-
was, sorry.
from previous versions. If you go back far enough, I think this was wording. Maybe it was Greg's wording. Greg's wording. I don't know. But yeah, if you want to put many conditions of approval and get rid of such, that's fine. We can move on. We got lots of things to do here.
And let me clarify, please, because I think I thought it was clear in that introductory paragraph that I put in the subcommittee document that the three separate conditions of approval have been in the conditional use permits ongoing since time immemorial. It's just recently that we've sectioned them out by preliminary conditions of approval and operating conditions of approval. That prior to that, they were all just lumped in together, but they still existed and in the same format. Not the same format, but in the same premise still existed.
So all you have to do here, folks, instead of such, is put the relevant conditions of approval and save this argument for another place. And just for what it's worth, I'm sorry to be butch here, but the arguments that sound like or seem like it was in a prior draft or somebody changed it or this and that, aren't probably going to get somewhere. I understand that's all frustrating, but the reality is, what are we going to do with the words on this screen now needs to be the focal point. And I think that adding the word relevant where your cursor is and put many instead of certain ongoing, then you have two sentences you can all live with and then fight it when you need to fight it.
Would it be okay, I don't like relevant too much either. Would it be okay to just use the word these conditions of approval, or is that too limiting too? And I'll also comment that I don't know that I've read anything that identifies the difference between operational and preliminary conditions of approval. And if it's there, I guess it would be helpful for me to know that, because not just for this particular work, but if we're actually identifying different types of conditions of approval, that's a space that seems important to understand.
That was one of the paragraphs that I had pointed out. I think.
So I don't mean in a
last
paragraph
meeting.
here, I mean like actually in documents that have existed. I hear it, but it's not something I've seen in actual past record or moving ahead. I don't know that I've ever heard classifying conditions of approval by preliminary or operational. So it's more to not a statement that we made somewhere, but where does that exist?
Okay, so are we done with this then?
Whoa.
Oh.
Whoa, time out here. We're not done with this one, clearly. Inga, you were about to say, I pointed it out at, and that's all great. Where is it in the document that we have as our most current draft? The distinction between these various things?
It's probably in the first 6 pages. I recall reading it. Let's point it out.
Because I think Catherine's point is just simply, okay, seems like an interesting point. We need to look at it, and that may be help with this particular issue here. But let's see it. Let's get everyone on the same page.
It might take a few minutes because it's such a very large document.
Yeah, I recall seeing it before we got into the meat of it. Just, this is the one, if we were scrolling down, it was a standalone page. It was before the definitions of categories. Pretty sure. And it was standalone and it wasn't tied to anything else. It was just an explanation. And I assume there would be an explanation when the county got around to the final comments on the text, and I just haven't gotten that far yet.
No problem.
Yeah, I do remember reading it. The reality is that the only time that distinction between operational and ongoing has happened in the history of the land use related to the landfill is in 21047. It's not in any of the previous land use decisions. They weren't structured that way in any of the previous land use decisions. It's only in the most recent one, which isn't reviewed as part of this effort.
Okay. Looks like a whole bunch more stuff has been added.
Yeah,
good.
no, this is the full document. So for some
Yeah.
reason it started all the way down at the bottom.
Okay, I was thinking you were in the section that was on CUP.
I know it's
Well, I guess I'll tell you, if it's important, it's not in the first 100 pages. People aren't going to read it and see it. So if this is an important issue to have someplace, it needs to be in the first 100 pages.
Well, I would ask, our task was, our charge was to review the historical record. If this is not a distinction that was identified within that record, it seems misleading to have it included in any space in this document, right? If it's not part of the work with which we were tasked to do, it wasn't a function of how we defined conditions of approval.
So it was a task that or it was an item that I was tasked to do, to explain the difference between the conditions of approvals. And that's why I added it in.
It was before this. Yep. I'm getting confused between the CUP and the full document.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is the full document, so it's not easy to go
So,
through.
and not at all, this is not intended to be, and hopefully not being taken as confrontational, but I would just ask that if there was a difference in conditions of approval, as far as explaining some sort of difference or different lanes or different classifications, at no time in, approaching 5 months worth of work have we talked about in this subcommittee or anywhere else that I'm aware of, and maybe I missed it,
No.
a difference of conditions of approval, like this is capitalized, you have preliminary approvals capitalized. I'm not aware where that's coming from. And I think that if it didn't exist in the record of which we were tasked with reviewing, then it shouldn't exist in this document either as an explanation to what end, right? I'm not sure why it's here. We haven't talked about it. It does not appear to be in the record that we reviewed. That's just what I'm trying to say.
So what paragraph, is this the more recently paragraph, Inga, that you're making this distinction?
Mm-hmm. I was just trying to explain to the layperson the difference in conditions of approval and
Okay,
how
when you say
how they move ahead, how the
there may
staff.
be there may be a way out of this, When you say more recently, let's get back to Mark's point. Have these distinctions been used in anything that we have reviewed in our massive charts?
No, and it was not intended to apply to that, to refer back to those. I was making a general statement in that the conditions of approval, conditional use permits that we review now have this distinction, these two sections. Not that I was referring back to any of the prior land use or the valley landfills.
Okay, so I just, the ask is simply to make this clear that, you know, while not involved in anything dealing with landfill CUPs, the most I think it needs to say at this point is, while not involved while these distinctions were not involved in any of the CUP conditions involved, staff is now segregating these conditions. And I think that at least doesn't create the impression that somehow we all of a sudden popped in this new analysis, which is clear to me now has never been part of what anyone was asked to do here as far as evaluate the landfill conditions.
And if it's as of 2021, you can put that date in there, as of 2021.
Does that not solve this one narrow problem as we're trying to unwind the Gordian knot here? We can fix this paragraph by adding that clear clarification.
Works for me.
All right, let's.
I'm gonna be fine with that, although I note that even if they weren't classified that way, they operated that way. So in the past. So, but I'm fine. This is the new classification, so I'm fine with the change.
So you can add, planning staff have specifically segregated, maybe is the word that makes it clear. And then you can preserve your argument that de facto that was what was going on, or overtly segregated, to make that clear. All right, so that string of the Gordian knot is done. Let's go back to the document we were on previously and see. So the proposition I'm putting forward is strike the word certain ongoing and put many. And then the second sentence, Benton County is not. And yeah, what's just wrong with say enforce the conditions of approval, period. I mean, we don't need a landfill, we don't need such. We just put the conditions of approval. Because we're not trying to make the point here. And if anyone is, it's getting lost. It'll never be nuanced out. Any opposition to that, folks? Okay, let's do that. Okay, what's next on our hit list of fun?
There were other changes in that paragraph. Um, I'd suggest going to the page 1 and where all the strikeouts aren't there, so you can just see how it reads and see if it is smooth. You could even make your changes on this one, Inga, to show what people just got rid of, which was the.
Yeah, this is a document that's linked to the website, so I can't
That's
change
right,
this.
you can't change that. I keep forgetting. Sorry. I put in a summary in tabular form of the subcommittee's review of the historical record since 1974 is included. That's the table I'm working on. The table provides an overview of the 14, and I got to check that again. Historical documents representing 80 conditions of approval or other information contained in the reviewed files. I think that got around some of Jeff's objections at the in the markup on page 2. If you go to that page 2 of this, Jeff's had some at the bottom. Other information contained unclear. It appears that there was a bunch of strikeouts there, and I just consolidated them all and said there's another piece that's missing that needs to be presented to you. And I also tried to get at your issue, Inga, that we're mixing charters and clarify that I just don't want to relitigate that one. Charter of the past I think we've done that. We've made changes, and I think those changes are reflected in the other part of the charter, the work group charter, that says we can make some changes that lead to improvements. So that's full disclosure. Anybody got, Sam, do you want to look at the first page again to see if you have any heartburn, or Jeff, can we just write it all off and say it's done?
This is Jeff. I'm fine with your revisions there at the bottom of that paragraph, and but I did not, like Inga apparently did, go back and check to see if these two things were part of the subcommittee's original charter. So if they're not part of the subcommittee's original charter, then we ought to have our original charter in there.
Well, okay. So is what we're talking about, the use of charter the first time it's used or the second time it's used? In that sentence that's on the screen. In other words, is the indented quote B3 copy and paste from the work group's charter?
Yes.
Okay, then the only confusing word is the first time the word charter is used, and then you can put this is with the tasks assigned to the past land use subcommittee, because it evolved over time. And we don't need to make a big issue out of that. It's just the scope of the work is consistent with the tasks assigned to the past conditional use subcommittee, and is reflective of the work group charter. Boom. It's just that there's not technically a capital C charter for the past CUP subcommittee.
Okay.
It was a work plan.
Sam, are you proposing removal of, well, B and 3?
No.
I don't actually, so.
You could get rid of the whole paragraph if we're not going to.
Right.
If we're not kick things out because it wasn't in the original charter, or the work of the description of the task, we don't need this. I just want some of those things that are vacations of areas to be kicked out of the historical document list.
in my view, nothing's getting kicked out of the historical document. The fact that, that the specific work plan and tasks for this subcommittee evolved from the charter is fine as one. I have approved every one of them, these changes. So I'm, someone's concerned that someone's gonna, after the fact, make an argument that somehow this subcommittee violated B3, then
No.
hell no.
Then get rid of the whole paragraph.
I mean, I'm fine with that, or simply change and have it, the scope of the work is consistent with the approved work plan of the past conditional use subcommittee.
Okay.
That's all, I mean, that does it.
So we're putting
Or
a
it can
period
just-
after, putting a period after subcommittee and deleting the rest?
You can do both as far as I'm concerned. I don't care, but my only little quibble was there's no charter for the subcommittee. There's a work plan and tasks.
Why don't we just change the first use of the term charter to work plan and leave it as is?
And take and include the rest and reflects the work group charter at.
I'm fine with that.
I mean, that would do it as far as the nits go about it's a work plan versus a charter for the subcommittee.
So
I'm fine with that too.
can I ask for reasons why we're including B and 3 in this statement? Like it actually means almost, it's, again, I don't know, that doesn't even say much to me, and I've sat through this work group work. I don't know that it lays anything out for anybody. I don't know that it tees up anything for anybody. I'm not sure really. To me, it seems like it doesn't need to be here. And I'm just asking why it is we think it's important that it is here. Because to me, it doesn't message anything in, like, in a nutshell, this introductory paragraph should lead us to the space that the body of the work of this subcommittee was to evaluate the conditions of approval. I don't see how this reinforces that. Like to review the historical record and evaluate, identify and evaluate those conditions of approval.
I'm okay with getting rid of the paragraph too.
As long as you guys aren't concerned about flashback, that makes sense to me.
Sam, is there some reason why you think that there might be some sort of response?
No, I don't have any inside information or any suspicion. It's the obsessive compulsive lawyer look for future yuck phenomena. Nothing else. And there was in this subcommittee early on, there was an issue as to what was in your scope and what was not in your scope. And His Holiness here ruled that it was within your scope. So, and I think that issue's done. So I don't feel a need. I just wanted to make sure you had a chance in case someone felt there still was.
Well, we didn't do any work related to developing protocols for the timely and broad distribution of CUP related information, blah, blah, blah. We haven't done anything along that line. That's been the public communication group or whoever's doing that.
I'd take this whole damn thing out, but that's just me.
I'm fine with that. I think that's a good idea.
I think I had another.
So before we get off that last paragraph, if you're not, that's fine. I mean, the last statement there for me, I don't think that captures what this work has been. This table provides an overview of the 14 historical documents representing 86 or 80 conditions of approval. I've seen both numbers now. We did not, so our work did not provide an overview. Our work provided a comprehensive analysis of the 14 historical documents. And an overview, I think, is just, That's the pile of documents. That's that whole record that we have. What the work of the subcommittee has been about trying to reach some sort of consensus on the interpretation of conditions of approval as the record presented it. The word overview to me does not tell me that. It doesn't set the table for our reader, and I don't mean the table as it is phrased here, but as in figuratively. We're not bringing our reader to the point that the work that we have done was to evaluate those conditions of approval for compliance. In short, it doesn't need to be those words per
Yeah,
se.
yeah, this also came apart because there was the debate about whether we should look at DEQ information. As Ingrid
Right.
pointed out, there was going to be a section on DEQ information. So if we're using that SAM rule that he approved it, so it stays in, I'm okay with it. But recall that there was a lot of objection to looking at the DEQ records at all. Quite frankly, you haven't seen that yet, so you can't really say whether or not it has any improvements or develop protocols for timely or broad distribution of related information. Because if we do something with the DEQ records that say that those records should be made available on a regular basis to the community at the auspices of the county, meaning county funded instead of everybody having to go through independent records requests, individual record requests, that would be an improvement that fits. But quite frankly, this is much too deep a discussion. Nobody's going to get it. We need to just move this. Just leave the DEQ record part in place and let's move on, please.
You're going to do the DEQ record,
Yes.
Ed? Okay. Okay, so the next one is a review of the document we received from Jeff with both his and Mark's comments. Is that showing up on your screen or do I need to share? It says past land use application conditions.
So Ed
that's
and
good.
Inga, I'm going to ask, I think that the conversation, Ed, that you were commenting on was the paragraph before. Mine was on the paragraph below. That last statement that was made at the end, and since the further we get away from it, the likelihood that we'll get back to that is, my comment was really to the word overview in that last paragraph, just before the one that we just eliminated. Ed, were your comments to that word and that phrasing of that last sentence, or was your comments to this paragraph?
It
So
was,
You haven't
So-
seen the table yet.
okay, well, so if this is a table that's different,
It's the summary table referred to in the sentence before.
so let me just frame up what I think is going on. The issue is the table provides an overview of the 14 historical documents representing 86 conditions of approval or other information reviewed file. Catherine's point was perhaps a better term than overview is, because as Ed correctly says, we haven't seen the document. It could be provides a summary of the detailed analyses of the 86 conditions of approval. Is that what that table is? It's just a concern over the overview. It doesn't do the big tables justice. Maybe the summary one that you're envisioning is an overview, but there might be a way to thread the needle, say this summary table provides an overview of the detailed analyses of If that is accurately what you have in mind for
Use-
those words.
use that language, and then when we get the table, people can look at it and see what the term should be.
Okay,
So
and
I-
perhaps it's a disconnect that I'm seeing between the sentence, a summary in tabular form, and then the table provides. So we've got summary, we've got table, we've got overview. I'm not following it maybe as easy as was intended. So maybe I'm just misreading it.
No,
Ed, are
if
are
you're
you talking-
misreading it, it's no good because it's got to be readily understandable by anybody. But when you, I need to give you another piece so we can come to the words that most people think are comfortable. We're playing with,
Sure,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Is there a bridge then from the sentence just before that, which is Benton County has acknowledged it did not? No, not the we're still in the same paragraph. Benton County's acknowledged it did not and does not have resources, et cetera, conditions of approval. And then we go to a summary, but that summary to me is not clear. What is that summary? And then how does it relate to the table? So I feel like I'm not following it easily.
understood.
And again, it could be just a matter of a couple words. So if you think it makes sense to look at that table first.
Yeah, I think so.
So Ed, you're doing a report of the DEQ information. Is that the summary table you're talking about? No.
No, you said
No,
So you're summarizing the table that we've already created? The one with all of the conditions of approval?
Yeah, which is 150 pages.
So can I ask what you're summarizing?
Sure. Why don't we, this is what Jeff kind of asked for. And what I did back in November. Could we see if we could share my screen? Would that be possible? So I don't keep everybody in the dark.
Mm,
And I'll see if I can.
Go ahead.
See if I have it up. Cannot. Screen. I hit screen up. There it comes. This should be it. So what this is, it is not well formatted at this time, but it is a table. It just does I called it in this case a summary assessment. It's a table of contents number. That's what Inga's been using. We've all used. That's what this row is what we've all been using for all of them. And I've just repeated it. And then I needed to understand how many conditions there were in each one. And then at that time, we were thinking of getting consensus on each one. So I just listed the number of conditions in each one. I couldn't keep track of them, so I put a column that said, this is landfill related, this one's power generation, this is quarry related. So for example, 74 was all landfill related. This one, 1999, BC 9906, that's all quarry related. So it was just a way to look to do a sort. And that's where I could run some summary statistics, and that comes up with 85 conditions. And I haven't checked it lately. but then you can see how many are related to power generation and related to quarry. And then this was as of November. These were the evaluating criteria for that the public members were using. And as I was doing this, I decided to use public members. We can change it to something else, county and republic. This will be the criteria that's in the current version of the large table. So there's like, superseded by something or whatever those other ones were. I don't know if there's 8 or not. And I'll just put in whether it's, I use 1 because it's easy to count. And figure out where we were on different things. And this would show, like in this case, everything from 74 for Republic's response. I believe it's anything below before 2002 is not is superseded by the MOU. So I would just put down a bunch of X's until we get down to, I guess, down to about here. And actually it keeps going, but you get the idea. And when you highlight this, you see everything is superseded. You look at this, and there will be county ones. And this one says there are a bunch of nuances. This one might disagree. It'll just point out that there's probably 2 issues that you need to get to the whole group. One is the 74 and the geographical definition, and the other one is whether the MOU is relevant. You see what I'm saying?
So I think this is phenomenal, and getting back to the words that we're trying to land the plane on, I think it's all just in word choice. I'm just throwing this out there instinctively. What we have on the screen is a summary table of findings by CUP condition. The 50, 60, however many page other thing is the detailed analysis that supports each of these rows, for lack of a better term. And so if we can capture that vernacular, the best vernacular, back up in the document we were just at, we can move beyond this issue, I think, accurately. Because this is a summary table, but it's not. It's to be distinguished from the 100 pages of detailed findings that this rolls up. Is that accurate, Ed? Generally speaking, that is the distinction that you had in mind here.
Yeah, and it was to try to get at comments like Jeff when I said something about not being in compliance or in compliance. How many of them? Well, that's will pop out of this row.
I think there needs to be a little bit of a distinction, because I guess I was relying on this language to be able to move over to the work group report where we have to do our introduction there. And so what you drafted here is specific to items that are in the subcommittee report. And referring to those items, which is fine. I'd have no problem with that. But I think I need something a little broader, less specific for the work group report introduction.
I'm open to any kind of wording. I just thought you folks needed to see what the work product might be like before you spend a lot of time on the word smithing.
So
Right,
Ed, this,
so go ahead, Catherine.
Ed, this is very attractive and it's very easy to get an overview. I'm curious because I know you're in process a little bit. If we could scroll up just a little bit where you list the conditions by number, will you be adding a brief comment to what those conditions actually are? Like in that condition number, we see 1 through 10, or, you know.
I was just looking for a score sheet, so no, I wasn't thinking of it. There was a hot button that somebody mentioned, hours of operation. So I flagged it in there. There's no reason we couldn't do it.
It might be helpful. So if it's hours of operation, or if it's parking, or if it's dust control or noise control, and then a couple things. Anybody looking at this will see the repetitive nature of certain conditions, which are kind of landing in that continual or ongoing space. But they will also be able to correlate those conditions with the assessment summary to the right, to see which ones either are, there's consensus or there's question about, meaning you would tie it to, like you have 1974, 1 through 7 listed. And then you look over at the assessment, we see status unclear, need DEQ information. I think it's line number 2 is where we've got a number 1 under status unclear. If we understood what line number 2 was, it might help correlate to that, why we might need DEQ information. And you wouldn't have to, as the person looking at this table would not have to go back to the bigger document to find out what that specific condition. They could look for the specific language, but maybe we just added a little phrase in there to identify what condition it was.
Yeah, that would make it more user friendly. Again, this was started back in November, and the only reason it
Sure.
was because I was losing track of things.
Right. So just for concrete action in no particular order, if you can add enough words, for instance, in line 6 through 12 there, to give us a prompt, that would be divine. And then if we can go back to, I'm not forgetting your question, Inga. We can go back to that introduction so we can nail that now. Then I think we can get to your ask third.
Ed, just so, maybe so you don't have to recreate the wheel, I had to summarize the conditions when I did the findings, the key findings. So those are summarized phrases of all the conditions. I don't know if you want to just copy and paste those in or not. You can make your own if you want. It's fine.
No, they should be consistent.
No, I think those are much longer than what I was thinking, so I'll just take what you said. I was just thinking of one line as like hours of operation, but I'll tell you what, it might not be all that hard to do both, and you folks can decide which format you like.
Ed,
I have another.
think, just a second, Kathy, I'm sorry. Ed, I think we're giving you author discretion here because you're the closest one to this thing, and do what you think is the best approach. We simply do not have time to go back and pick between, a short version and a longer version. You just create the Patera optimum one.
Okay, I'll look at both.
Okay, so now can we go back to maybe Ed, you stop sharing screening, then you share your screen to get back to the introductory language. And now we're at the word, we're trying to now, with this new knowledge, we are futzing with the words a summary in tabular form. Okay, so I think this is something like a summary table of findings of the CUP findings since 1974. And then I think you need to tell the reader for background info, something like, to get the data or the reasoning behind that table, you need to go to pages and then X through 100 to find the detail that supports each of those check marks above. That then keys the reader into what the two documents that are later on are going to do. And then I think it's fair to say for this draft that, as you will see, the public members found, and just highlight, approximately X in compliance, Y unknowns, Z pending additional information. The county and Republic believe most of them are resolved by the MOU. And that gives them an overview of how to read these documents.
Okay.
Now, Inga, I'm sorry, can you frame up the best way, better than me, I'm sure, the ask that you had? You wanted to have what?
So we needed the introduction, the work group section for the key findings and key recommendations. This introduction here was supposed to be copied and pasted into that as that introduction for that section. I don't know that it's going to, I don't know this is gonna be a problem until I see Ed's updated revisions. That I don't think it's gonna be a problem. I could just maybe take out some of the specific wording where we go into the tables.
Into what tables? The big, huge 100 pages of tables? Is that what you're referring to?
So you want us to have an introduction before the key findings and key recommendations? And that was waiting on this language. But
yes, and it was waiting on, can you go to that specific section of, are you talking about in the 100 pages?
yes.
Okay, so maybe go to that and we'll see what it looks like now.
So there's nothing there now. So
Well,
this
that's what we're,
yes, that's
isn't
what
that
we're
what
working
we
on.
just did? This
That's
is,
what I thought we were waiting for. Yeah, for this introductory language.
that's where it goes. Yeah. It also goes in the body of their report. Because I'll remember the subcommittee report is the reference document. This is the, if you will, the detailed executive summary of that. So the same introduction needs to be in both places. And then then you had, so that solves that. Then the key findings part, where are you on that? The introduction to that, or is this it?
Well, this is, you said just you use what Daniel had already created, that we can use
Okay.
that for all of the sections.
That's fine.
Yeah, so are we, Ed, are you going to revise that, or I can make, well, I'll put this video up as quick as I can so you can refer back to it.
That'd be
Or
great.
would you, yeah, okay.
Then
I can go, I can,
I'll just try to give you both pieces at once, but if you put the video up so I can catch everybody's intentions, if I can discern that.
yeah. I can put that up right after this meeting. That should be ready.
Thank you.
Okay. So actually, I forgot about this intersectional document. Did you want to go over that, Sam? This is, I believe this was the legal language.
Yeah,
Or you
let's
wanna-
key that up briefly, because that'll be Wednesday's conversation, as I recall, with the legal subcommittee. Well, wait a minute, I'm sorry, go to the top. What is this from? This is topic 1 from whom?
I believe this is what you sent, is it not?
Well, yeah, I mean, all I did is copy and pasted stuff, but I mean, what this
This is
topic
the
is.
old introduction.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is the old introduction, so the new introduction needs to be in its place.
Right, but we were still talking about having the more complex legal language in a separate section. And this is, I thought that you had reworked that language with that intent.
I'm just reading it, trying to catch up. Well, if I'm tracking this, what the paragraph that's captioned compliance with past land use and their status introduction, that document is now on this page overridden by what we just accomplished.
This
No.
was separate.
Where,
This was
but
the more legalized terms that Ginny had put together, and we said at the last meeting that you were going to go back and revise it slightly, and it was going to go in a separate section from the intro because it still had some importance, but it wasn't the more general people-friendly version that we wanted to have in the intro.
But did this language, is it now existing in the legal report or in the land use section?
It's not existing anywhere currently.
Well, it has to be some version of it. I mean, I didn't make up these words. They came, I copy and pasted them from somewhere.
Well, right, it was from all those prior introductory versions.
But what I'm saying, if we have a new introduction, does not this become moot?
It replaces this piece, but what we had asked about doing is illegal positioning things show up somewhere else in a standalone section, which I think you now have included or potentially including in the legal section.
And that's what I'm trying to stumble through. If you could scroll down a little bit.
It's not anything.
Yeah, so this piece goes away and we have a new introduction clearly. So continue scrolling down to what is the demarcation point here? So we do not, okay. So we do not have the quote unquote compatibility topic problem anymore because those words have been removed from the CUP introduction. We do need somewhere in that introduction at the end probably a crosswalk sentence or two that says there have been discussions surrounding the meaning of compatibility. Yeah. And here's what they mean. And that can just refer, and that just gets referred to the appropriate section in the legal subcommittee's report that talks about the compatibility issue. And that is, if you can scroll down, please, so I can see the rest of it. it's really the section in blue that we need to make sure is in the legal subcommittee so it can be cross-referenced
Right.
in the CUP introduction.
Right.
So I guess it's working with Greg to tee that up for our joint meeting on Wednesday and to make sure he has a topic that's called, the meaning of the word, quote, compatible, unquote.
Okey-doke. All right, well, it's 10 minutes to 5 and we only got through one item on this agenda list.
Well, we got through two. We got introduction and intersectionality, but I see your point. So can we at least talk a little bit here about, because this is the key thing that we need for this next draft so that the work group can that's going out on Friday. And it's for the work group. It's going to be the major focus of the work group meeting a week from Thursday, which are the key findings and recommendations here. And so I have not had time. I read Mark's when they came in, and Jeff's, or Inga, this is the one that Jeff sent in this afternoon sometime.
Yes.
Okay, so I haven't had a chance to read his response. Mark, have you had a chance to read Jeff's response to your comments yet?
No,
Okay, well, why not? That's a joke.
I know.
So what is our plan between now and Thursday to get this in as best shape as we can get this? I'm just scanning it now on my hard copy. So thinking out loud, we have to move from the putting a comment in a response to actual language wherever possible to see if we can find a balanced finding, for instance. And so let's just take CUP F1A2. It's a mouthful. Current federal rules prohibit the county from limiting access to the landfill. This is finding. Well, can't we just add in there current federal rules and have it as it says, current federal rules prohibit the county from limiting access to the landfill. This is a result of a Commerce Clause. This is a result of a I don't know when it was, 19X case involving the Commerce Clause. The county and Republic could mutually agree to limit landfill service area. And Republic has the right to limit access to the landfill. I mean, those are true statements. Whether or not they're good policy or bad policy is a different story. But those three statements together are they not a fair representation of that finding? You're not saying what they should do. You're just saying this could happen. This can't happen because of a Supreme Court case. It could happen voluntarily. Jeff?
You're muted. Jeff, you're muted.
Sorry about that. One of these days, after 10 years of using Zoom, I'll figure that out.
Yeah.
I'd want to talk to Republic about that, because I am not certain that we could agree to, even if we did it like in the franchise agreement, agree to limit the waste shed. I'd want to talk to them about that.
But, and that's fine as to the, the detail, but there's a difference between it's two different things. Is it legally permissible for the franchise agreement to have the county and republic agree? And if no, then we have to fight with that, my first suggested sentence. If it's permissible, but for a business purpose, it's, it doesn't work, or because of existing agreements, that's another thing. But the finding here is really, this finding on its face seems to be about what the law is, not what the economic and or political ramifications are. And that's the distinction I'm trying to get at. These aren't arguments as to if it's, in this particular example, it's a finding about what the law is, not what's politically or economically viable.
And you need to say it's an impression, it's an interpretation of the law. It's not a current federal rule.
Right, it's a court case. It's not a rule. I mean, under current federal law, the Supreme Court has stated, ...
And that's been validated by the independent person that we've added to the legal group.
That's my understanding. As I recall, she agrees that that's what the U.S. Supreme Court said.
Okay, even though there's nothing that's coming from out of state.
Yeah, I read if you read the memo about that for Legal Services Committee, that's exactly what it says, because it has the effect of limiting out-of-state commerce.
Even if it were previously agreed to by the parties.
Even if it were previously agreed to by the parties.
You need to get that very clear in that memo.
I think it's very clear.
Okay.
So yeah, who knows what I looked at the court case. The court case does clearly say you can't, interfere with interstate commerce. But I'm
That's
pretty
where I'm
sure.
having trouble. That's exactly why I'm having trouble, because everyone I've seen, there has to be a nexus with interstate commerce.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that the landfill does not have to allow any person who just rolls up and says, I've got this massive thing of trash here and I want to dump it. I believe that Republic Services, if they were in agreement with the county, if there is an agreement to limit where waste could come from, the owner of the landfill can control. It happens in Lane County, for example, at Short Mountain. Not everyone can go down there and dump. And I believe that's probably the case at other landfills where there can be voluntary limitation. Republic Services may choose not to do so, but I don't think there's anything in the law that prohibits Republic from managing their landfill.
As long as it doesn't violate the Interstate Commerce Clause.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the situation is right.
Mark may well be right that we could contractually limit the waste. But I do not know that without talking to my client, and I can't agree to this language. Wants to add that.
Sure. Yeah.
No, we're
And,
not asking, no one's asking anyone to agree to language now. I'm simply using this one example as a vehicle to make the important distinctions here. So let me try to summarize my own thoughts to see if they make sense, and then you can accept or reject that. So it really, this finding would be the Supreme Court under the Commerce Clause precludes Republic from denying trash, from not taking trash from other states.
it precludes the county from imposing a condition prohibiting.
Okay, put that in then. Okay, whatever it is, that sentence in. It also seems to say that as long as it doesn't violate interstate commerce, the county and Republic could agree to limit landfill in-state landfill service areas. And Republic has the right to limit in-state access to its landfill.
And that's the part that I don't know is true.
I think
And so,
with the EQ permit,
yeah, of course, if they qualify under all the other conditions, but
I mean, there's DEQ permits, there are the existing contracts. So I do not know if that statement is correct or not.
as a matter of law or as a matter of
As a matter
policy?
of law, as a matter of
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And so we'll figure that out. But that I'm trying to say, this is about what the law is, not what the business decisions could be or the economic decisions could be. Is there another example? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was just going to say, and the point of my comment here was, this was not a finding that was concluded upon review of the record. The record basically says that the geographic limitations were imposed in 1974, and then staff added these words in here. So I was responding to that to say that these were not something that was established by a process of reviewing the record, and trying to clarify that I believe that the county and the Republic Services could voluntarily agree to limit, in the same way that if Republic now would have the ability to tell people that they can't bring their garbage to the landfill because we've exceeded our tonnage cap and you can't bring your waste here. Otherwise, it's going to cause us a violation of our franchise agreement. So similarly, it could be voluntarily agreed to. I just wanted to make sure that this was not simply something that I think everybody in the county needs to understand that the county cannot unilaterally impose a condition to prevent people from bringing waste from other counties. That is important for people to understand. But the corollary is that they could agree, if Republic Services agreed, to be able to do something to limit the amount of waste. So sorry about that.
and I'm going back, I haven't read this closely. This is a summary of the CUP table.
No.
Well, I think what Inga has done here is pulled forward this condition and summarized it in italices, and then added that highlighted phrase that I then commented upon. That's the genesis of what's going on here.
It's just that everything else reads it's actually in the record.
Okay, so there's several things going on. Go ahead, Ed.
The A2 jumps to the legal problem. It's not part of the CUP review.
No,
It is.
it's not at all.
It Jeff added that, and also I added that in my revised comments.
Okay, so just a couple of things here because we're running out of time. I've got to hop on the next subcommittee meeting here. I'm already late. So a couple of things I say lovingly. The fact that something was added without consultation in the subcommittee, that's going to happen back and forth because we don't have a static document that we can deal with. And it tends to not get us to where we need to be. Secondly, if there is a major point that this subcommittee wants to make about what the county's ability is or not ability, or it doesn't have ability to do under the law, I think it's fine to make it as long as in the introduction to your findings and recommendations, it says that some of the below findings we'll just take findings. Some of the below findings are a function of the legal subcommittee's work as well. And in order to have the concepts in one place, they are merged in certain circumstances. So the reader has the complete picture and doesn't have to read the existing F1A2 and then not know that there's a problem with it, later on. And so the fact that's not in your 150 pages, I get it, and that can be solved by an introduction statement. It's not a reason to take it out, in my view, because I think that distracts from the reader's ability to see the complete picture. But finally, we just got to figure out how are we going to move this document the best we can between now and Thursday at whatever. How are we going to reconcile this? And I was just trying to pick one as an example.
Well, I'm going to go back to something that Mark said at the last meeting, which is, and it's something that when I was going back through and reviewing, it occurred to me. I mean, we're essentially making the same arguments about the specific conditions as are contained in the master document. And maybe we should just, maybe these, the responses to the conditions aren't really findings or recommendations, which I think was the point Mark made. And maybe we should just lift all of those out and let the document speak for itself and then go with what the key recommendations are. That might be faster than going back through all of these conditions and say, well, they said, or we said, or here's some evidence that supports our position, which is already in the master document. That would shorten things down quite a bit as well.
And then playing this out so I understand it, then we use Ed's summary table of findings as the basis for that.
Yeah.
Instead of this.
Yeah, because with Ed's summary table, which of course I reserve the right to review.
No, you don't get the right.
We have his summary table. We've got the long report that goes through all of the conditions with all of the comments. And then we have this, which basically raises all the same arguments about compliance that are in those two other documents. So it seems to me that if we're going to go with key findings, that we maybe want to, and recommendations, we may want to go to, we may want to take all these things out. That's up to the rest of the committee, but that thought occurred to me because many places later on, I say, we responded to this, we responded to this, we responded to this. And so it is just a section to re-argue the same arguments we've made in 2 other places. I'm wondering how useful that's going to be to the reader.
Okay, so let's just play that out. So then if we did that, then the key findings of this subcommittee could be things that I'm understanding the public members want to call most attention to, which please don't fight the wording in the moment. But it's like the county has acknowledged it doesn't have the resources and technical expertise to enforce the conditions of approval. Finding 1. Recommendation 1, the commissioners should consider A, B, C to solve finding number 1. So they're more global findings at the big picture here, and not in this treatment because it is duplicative now that now that's been pointed out to me, and they get to the key takeaways of what's going on from a systemic holistic process perspective of how CUPs have been processed. Without the, so we don't have time to get into the details, but is that general concept worth pursuing? What we just said, what I just said, thumbs up, sideways, or thumbs down? Mark, you're the last thumb remaining to be seen.
Yeah, because I'm not going to put I mean, my thumb is up in the sense that I do believe, as Jeff has articulated, that these specific list of detailed findings are duplicative of what we've already put later in the bigger document. However, we do need to have the overarching, what did we learn by going through this process of evaluating all these prior land use conditions, and how can we best communicate that to the policymakers and to the community? So yes, the overarching things, which Jeff has substantially edited, of the things that I proposed, and I don't know if others have had a chance to look at that, Ed or Catherine or Jeff, to write their own in terms of what did we learn through this process. That's what I was trying to get at by suggesting these for consideration as overarching findings. So I'm fine. So that was a thumbs up, but explaining, it's not a simple thumbs up.
Okay, so let me see if I understand this, Mark. You are agreeing with Jeff because Jeff agreed with what you said at the last meeting. That's awful generous. It's awful generous of you to do that.
I always agree with Jeff. Jeff and I are always in agreement.
Okay, so that's just so collaborative of you. So Inga, unfortunately, the task falls to you for the next rewrite of this thing that is basically using the introduction we landed today. It involves stripping the specific findings, for lack of a better term, focuses in on the overarching findings and recommendations for this section of the report. And then just those pieces, if you can send them out and give everyone till Wednesday at noon to track change those. Well, I'll pick up date in a minute, until X date and time. And then we will have to have one more meeting to land the plane on those overarching findings and recommendations. And please do not put comments other than if you want to put an explanation of why you're finding. We need to see actual words for the findings.
So
otherwise,
and we're going to start with what I wrote and what Jeff has commented on
Responded
and
to.
suggested
Yes.
editing. Those are the,
Yes.
because I don't
Yes.
believe that Ed or Catherine have attempted to try to, I just threw these out here as things that I thought were important in terms of overarching findings.
Yep. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're taking what Inga has on her screen here. And it's just getting, I'll put it in one document so we can see what it looks like and then send it out.
Well, at least I don't have to explain what none means now.
Good. But you will have to explain what some means, or the word many, as we've talked about here this afternoon. All right, so Inga, when can you get that done? This sort of new and improved economical version?
It seems like it seems like folks could just use this document as it is now. And I mean, for Ed and Catherine, if they haven't gone through that process, look at the findings that Inga had put forth and decide if upon review of those findings, whether there's any other overarching findings that they want to throw into the beginning part of the document. I don't know that we necessarily have to wait for Inga to delete all the detailed stuff below but that's just a thought.
Well, I think it's pretty easy to copy and paste the new introduction and these
I
key
see.
findings, overarching, call it, findings and recommendations into one document. Okay, and get that out, and then we're going to have another meeting. Excuse me, to reconcile them so we can get them out on Friday at noon. So when can you guys, Catherine and Ed, when will you have time to do that piece?
To have another meeting?
Yes, and then get them in so we can look at them. And if I have time, what I'll do, if you're still at loggerheads with what the 4 people's comments that you send in by whenever, I'll take a shot at doing a facilitator's proposal for each one, and to start off with, trying to merge them ideas together.
My schedule is really pretty open this week. So anytime will work with me in terms of getting work products to Inga. How about if I break it up, the introduction revision tomorrow at noon. That's the narrative, and the table, a draft. How about 3 o'clock on Wednesday? I'll try to speed that up.
The table and that's fine, but let's just focus on the key findings and recommendations first.
If you want that first, I should be able to do it by noon tomorrow.
Catherine, what's your dance card look like?
It's always exciting. I will see what I can do. I've got meetings pretty heavy again this week, so I'll take a look. And that's
So
that's
all you can do, yeah. And then, well, what about then a follow-up just on the key findings and recommendations sometime between 1 and 3:30 on Wednesday?
I will say for me, for Wednesday, I have 4 other commitments besides normal work commitments. So Wednesday is a very difficult day for me.
Thursday morning at Odark 100 then.
Right? That might work. You bring the coffee.
Absolutely. I was gonna bring donuts too. So what time can people do on Thursday morning? Earlier the better, because staff is getting their stuff to me in the afternoon.
For me, it's either finishing by 7:45 in the morning or starting again at 9:30.
Folks, what do you say?
I'm available all day on Thursday.
I'm scheduled to
mean-
be at the, I'm scheduled to be at the Capitol all day on Thursday.
Oh, God.
Now that
Well,
may,
what-
that may be modified by COVID testing. If I'm still testing positive for COVID, I'm not going.
Right.
So, but at this point,
How about Wednesday evening? The land's capacity ends at 5:30. We could start at 5:30 or 6 to 7:30.
Wednesday night's fine.
I am not available Wednesday evening at all.
I can make that work.
I'd probably encourage that you make that Wednesday evening work in case there's extra buffer time that's needed on Thursday, and I can just listen to the recording or
Okay. Right. So,
I can do
Uh,
Wednesday evening. Oh, wait a minute. No, hang on.
unless we're
Long day.
starting, right, unless we're starting at 8 PM on Wednesday, and I know we've done that once, then that was late.
Yeah, my only issue on Wednesday is that I have to get my dad dinner because I'm going to be at his house. But if it's 5:30 or later, I should be able to do that.
okay, well, let's start at 5:45 for an hour and a half. And Inga will send out the invite and we'll take her from there.
So I
Good
will
work, folks.
send. I'll send out the updated draft when Ed gets me his new intro tomorrow at noon.
And meanwhile, Catherine and Ed could just look at the Mark Jeff version that was sent out for this meeting.
Okay,
It just-
fine.
Can you just, Mark, who sent it last? Inga, did you send it out last to everyone or did?
Jeff
Jeff did.
sent it. I linked it to the agenda that I sent out, the revised agenda that was sent out right before this meeting.
So Jeff, just for ease, just forward it again so it's on top of everyone's list. The email you sent out at 2 something.
All right.
It's on
Just
the
send that.
website, if that
Okay.
helps anyone.
Okay, great.
Folks, I have to sign off. I need to be in
Ciao.
Scappoose by 6 for a meeting.
Good luck. That's living. Have fun. Ciao, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Night, Ed.
Here, enjoy.